I was in my garden, trimming my roses when my phone rang. It was my daughter Hannah screaming that my grandson had been in a car crash. My heart stopped. She said he needed surgery, immediately, and that they didn't have enough money to cover it. Without thinking, I wired them $42,000. I didn't ask questions. I just acted, because that's what mothers do. But 2 days later, I saw something on Facebook that made my blood run cold. A photo of my injured grandson, laughing at a beach party. No hospital, no injury, just a group of kids drinking piña coladas under the sun. At first, I thought it was old, a mistake. But then I heard the truth, and it shattered something inside me. My kids had staged the entire emergency. The phone call, the fake hospital, the tears, all of it, just to get their hands on my retirement savings. That was the moment. Something inside me snapped. I didn't confront them right away. No. I smiled. I played the sweet, naive mom they thought they could control. But behind the scenes, I was setting a trap. A quiet, legal, airtight trap that would make sure they never saw another penny of mine again. They wanted to play games with my love. Now they were about to lose something they never imagined. My name is Eleanor Bennett, and I'm 68 years old. I live in a small, cedar-shingled cottage just outside of Portland, Maine. I'm a mother of 2, Hannah and Jeremy, and a proud grandmother of 4. My days used to be filled with laughter, backyard barbecues, and bedtime stories. I wasn't just a mom. I was the glue. The one who remembered birthdays, baked pies from scratch, and kept everyone together, even when the world outside felt like it was falling apart. I was never rich. Not in the traditional sense, but I worked hard my entire life as a public school teacher. Every penny I earned, I saved. I clipped coupons. I patched my own clothes. I paid off my mortgage by the time I was 50. I even started a small online antique shop after retiring. Just for something to do, but it did surprisingly well. I never told the kids how much I made from it. I just liked having a little something tucked away, just in case. Family meant everything to me. I gave up promotions to make it to every soccer game and dance recital. When their father Daniel passed away from a sudden stroke 20 years ago, I didn't crumble. I became even stronger. I grieved in private so my kids wouldn't have to carry that burden. I sold his truck, downsized, and funneled what I had into college funds and emergency savings. When Hannah got pregnant at 20, I didn't scold her. I moved her into the house, took care of her baby while she worked part-time, and treated my new grandson as if he were my own. When Jeremy lost his job in Boston, I let him stay in the guest room for 6 months. No rent, no expectations, just of. That's what moms do. But somewhere along the line, something shifted. As the years passed, the phone calls grew fewer. The visits turned into quick drop-offs. My birthday was often remembered with a late text or not at all. And yet, whenever they needed help, money for a down payment, a loan for a new car, bailouts for emergencies, I was there. Without hesitation, I began to notice how comfortable they had become with asking, and how uncomfortable they became when I said no. Jeremy's wife, Lana, was always polite on the surface, but I could feel her eyes scanning my house, measuring its worth, noticing every heirloom. "It's so sweet how you still have these little trinkets from your travels," she'd say, fingering the antique clock I brought back from Austria. Sweet or valuable? Hannah's husband, Mike, didn't bother hiding his disdain. "You're sitting on a gold mine," he once joked when he saw my bank statement accidentally left on the counter. I laughed it off, but my stomach tightened. That wasn't a joke. That was a hint. What hurt the most wasn't that they needed help. It was how quickly they forgot the hands that fed them. I once overheard Hannah tell a friend, "My mom's kind of useless now, but at least she has cash." That sentence replayed in my mind for days. I stayed silent. I wanted to believe it was just a slip. Still, I kept giving. Quietly, faithfully, until the emergency call about my grandson's accident. That phone call didn't just break my heart. It opened my eyes. I later found out there was no crash, no surgery, not even a hospital visit. It was a scheme, planned by Hannah and Jeremy. A test, maybe, to see if I'd give up my emergency fund without resistance. And I did. Of course I did. Because I was their mother. But the betrayal wasn't just about the money. It was about every sacrifice I had ever made for them, turned to dust. Every birthday party I threw, every late-night math lesson, every time I went without so they could have more, all erased by their greed. I spent a few days in shock, in silence, just sitting, watching the wind move through the trees in my backyard, thinking. Then I remembered something my late husband once told me. You can forgive people and still protect yourself. So that's what I decided to do. What my children didn't know was that I had more than just a savings account. Over the years, I had quietly invested in land outside of town. Acres of pine forest my brother had sold me for pennies decades ago. That land had appreciated like crazy. Today, it's worth over $2.7 million, untouched, unrecorded in my regular bank records. And not a soul in the family knew. And that wasn't the only secret I kept. Years ago, I rewrote my will, quietly, carefully, with the help of a lawyer who specialized in toxic family situations. Yes, that's a thing. I didn't cut them out completely. That would raise suspicion. I just made sure the bulk of my estate would go somewhere else, somewhere it would truly be appreciated. There's a young woman who works at the post office down the street, Angela. She's 26, works 2 jobs, and takes care of her disabled brother. She brings me groceries sometimes and refuses to accept tips. I've watched how she treats people. I've watched how she treats me. With dignity. With warmth. When I asked her what she'd do with $10,000, she said, "Pay off my brother's medical debt, that's all." That's the kind of person who deserves a second chance. And so with the quiet force only a mother can possess, I began setting the pieces in motion. They think they fooled me. They think they got away with it. But what's coming next will make them wish they never underestimated the woman who gave them everything. After I found out about the fake emergency, I didn't confront anyone. Not right away. I needed time to think, to observe. And once I started paying attention, not just as a mother, but as a woman who'd been taken for granted, I saw everything. I had been too blinded by love to notice before. It started with the small things. I was at Hannah's house one Sunday, supposedly for family dinner. But when I arrived, I was immediately handed a mop. "Could you just help wipe up the kitchen real quick?" she asked, not even hugging me hello. Mike's been too busy to clean. Dinner turned out to be takeout. They ate it on the couch while I stood at the sink washing dishes, my food going cold behind me. At some point I realized they hadn't even set a plate for me. That became the new norm. Whenever I visited, I was put to work, folding laundry, watching the kids, cleaning up. Not asked, expected. If I sat down, Hannah would give me that tight smile and say, "Can you just give me a hand with one more thing?" And Jeremy? He was worse. He started showing up at my house, unannounced. He'd bring a laundry bag with him. "Lana says our washer's acting up." He'd shrug, dumping it on my floor like it was the most natural thing in the world. "You're not doing anything, right?" He'd sit on his phone while I sorted his socks. It would have been laughable, if it hadn't hurt so much. At family events, things got more humiliating. On Thanksgiving, they held the dinner at Jeremy and Lana's place. I wasn't even told, until the day before. When I walked in, there was no seat for me at the main table. Just a folding chair near the corner of the room, next to the garbage bin. "I thought you'd be more comfortable over there," Lana said sweetly, sipping her wine. I wasn't asked to carve the turkey like I always used to. I wasn't asked to lead the prayer. I wasn't even served first. I felt invisible, like some unwanted extra in a movie I used to star in. Then came Christmas. I didn't get a single gift, not even from the grandkids. I brought hand-knitted scarves and books for everyone, but my box sat unopened while they exchanged iPhones and designer shoes. I smiled through it all. But that night I cried harder than I had in years. The worst came 3 months later. I'd been having some trouble with my knees. Arthritis, mostly. My doctor recommended I take it easy, maybe move in with family while I got treatment. Just For a few weeks. So I brought it up at brunch. I'll never forget the silence that followed. Jeremy looked at Hannah, Hannah looked at Mike, and then Mike said it, straight-faced, not a flicker of empathy. "We don't really have space for you. Plus, with the kids and all, it'd just throw everything off." I turned to Hannah. She fiddled with her spoon and said, "It's not that we don't want you, Mom. It's just, you'd be a lot to take care of right now. You understand, right? A lot to take care of. A burden." That's what I had become. The woman who raised them, fed them, sacrificed. Her youth, her health, her finances, was now too inconvenient to house for a few weeks. I went home, sat in my recliner, and stared out the window until it got dark. I think that's when something inside me truly cracked. Not in a violent way, not even in anger. It was just clarity. Cold and clear. They didn't see me as a person anymore. They saw me as a resource, a live-in maid when needed, a personal ATM, a walking inconvenience the rest of the time. And I began to realize something else too. This wasn't just about the kids. There was influence, pressure coming from outside. Specifically, Lana and Mike. Lana had always had Jeremy wrapped around her finger. She controlled their finances, their vacations, their decisions. She managed every aspect of their lives, including who got what. I once overheard her whispering to Jeremy in my kitchen saying, "If she gives Hannah the house, we'll be left with nothing. You better make sure you get her on your side." Mike was even more aggressive. A few months earlier, I had been trying to explain my will, just to make sure the kids understood everything. Mike cut me off and said, "Let the lawyers figure that out. It's your job to make sure there's something worth figuring out." The words stung. But more than that, they revealed the truth. They were all waiting for me to die, and while they waited, they were going to take what they could. Bit by bit, manipulation by manipulation, I stopped being invited to birthdays. Grandparents' Day came and went at the kids' school. I wasn't even told. When I found out later from Angela at the post office, her niece goes to the same school, I called Hannah. She said, "Oh, I didn't think you'd want to come. It's just chaos with all the kids." I started to feel like I didn't exist. When Jeremy's youngest turned 3, they threw a big party at a rented play zone. There were balloons, face painters, a magician. I found out after the fact. On Facebook. There I was, scrolling past pictures of my son grinning ear to ear, my grandchildren wearing paper crowns, and I hadn't even known it was happening. That wasn't a mistake, that was intentional. Each little exclusion was a knife. Each insult disguised as kindness was salt in the wound. I finally understood what I had become in their eyes. Not a matriarch, not a mother, but a leftover. A last resort. And the moment I stopped giving, I would be discarded altogether. So I stopped asking for affection. I stopped expecting respect, and I started planning. They wanted to treat me like I was disposable? Fine. But before they threw me away, I was going to show them exactly who they had underestimated. It was a Tuesday morning when it happened. The betrayal that would change everything. The sun was bright outside, filtering softly through the lace curtains in my kitchen. I had just brewed a fresh pot of tea when my phone rang. It was Hannah. "Hey, Mom, Jeremy's in trouble," she said in a low, urgent tone. "He's been in an accident. It's bad." My heart jumped. "What happened? Where is he?" "He's at Maine General." Lana's hysterical. "It was a truck. He got hit changing lanes. Internal bleeding, they said. He's not awake." I dropped my cup. It shattered on the floor. My hands were shaking. "Oh my God, I'm coming now." "Wait, listen," Hannah said quickly. "The hospital is demanding payment for surgery. The insurance isn't processing fast enough. They want a deposit up front. 10,000. Now." My brain raced. "That doesn't make sense. They can't deny surgery." "Mom, this is real. Jeremy could die." The fear in her voice wasn't something I could ignore. I didn't even question it. I grabbed my emergency envelope from the locked kitchen drawer. It had $12,000 in it. I had been saving it for home repairs, maybe a vacation I'd never taken. I tucked it into my purse, got into my car, and drove straight to Hannah's house. When I arrived, she opened the door with red eyes and hugged me tightly. "You brought it?" she whispered. I handed over the envelope without hesitation. "How bad is he?" There was a pause. They just rushed him into surgery. Lana's on her way to the hospital." I looked at her, confused. "Why aren't you there?" she stammered. "They wouldn't let me back. Something about too many people. I'm just waiting for an update." It didn't feel right, but my emotions were louder than my instincts. I stayed with her for a while. We barely spoke. She seemed distracted. I kept checking my phone, waiting for updates, but nothing came. No calls, no texts. That night I went home and sat in the dark. I prayed, I wept, I worried. The next morning, still no word. I called Jeremy's phone, straight to voicemail. I called Lana, no answer. I called the hospital, and that's when the ground fell out from under me. "There's no patient named Jeremy Bennett admitted here," the nurse told me gently. "Not yesterday, not this week." I hung up and stared at the wall. My mouth was dry. My heart was pounding. No patient. I called another hospital. Same answer. It hit me like a freight train. There had been no accident, no internal bleeding, no emergency surgery. The entire story was fake. They had done it again. This time, they didn't just lie. They planned it. Together. Jeremy, Lana, Hannah, maybe even Mike. This wasn't desperation. This was theft. I sat at my kitchen table in complete silence for nearly 2 hours. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even move. I just kept hearing my son's voice, in my head, laughing with me as a little boy. My daughter's arms wrapped around my waist as I braided her hair, their tiny fingers in mine as I walked them to school. How did we get here? I felt something deep inside me crack, slowly, like ice under pressure. It wasn't rage. It was grief. The kind that settles in your bones and stays there. And in that silence I realized something. They didn't love me. Not really. They used me, over and over, and now they had crossed a line that could never be undone. A few days later, Hannah texted me, casual as ever. "Hey, just checking in. How are your knees doing?" As if nothing had happened. As if she hadn't watched me hand her my life savings while feeding me a lie. I didn't respond. I didn't respond when Jeremy called either. He left a voicemail saying, "Thanks for the help, Mom. I'm okay now. Lana's taking care of me. Call you later." There was no shame. No apology. They had already moved on. But I hadn't. That weekend I went over to Jeremy's house. I knocked on the door. Lana opened it, surprised. "Eleanor." What a surprise. I stepped in without asking. Jeremy was sitting on the couch, eating chips. His eyes widened when he saw me. "Hey, Mom, what are you doing here?" "I just wanted to see for myself," I said quietly. He paused. "See what?" "You. After the surgery. After the accident." His face tightened. Lana looked away, and in that moment, we all knew I knew. I didn't yell. I didn't ask for the money back. I didn't even accuse them outright. I simply looked at my son, my grown son, and said, "You didn't even pretend to be hurt." Then I turned around and left. That was the last time I saw him face to face. That night, the silence in my house was deafening. Not the kind of silence that gives peace. The kind that reminds you you're utterly alone. I stayed up. Until dawn, I thought about my husband, about the promises we made to each other, about the life we wanted to give our kids, and how badly they'd broken it. But still, I didn't move toward revenge. Not yet. Because before anything else, I had to mourn. Not just the money, not just the lie, but the family I thought I had, the one that never really existed. People think that growing older makes you weaker, that after a certain age you're supposed to shrink, stay quiet, stay grateful, stay out of the way. But I had never been the shrinking type. I didn't scream when I found out my kids had lied. I didn't storm into their homes demanding apologies or money. No. I went quiet. Because quiet doesn't mean defeated. It means calculating, and I had spent enough of my life giving without keeping track. That ended now. The next morning, I pulled the lockbox out from the back of my closet. Dusty, cold, and exactly where I'd left it 10 years ago. Inside were folders, lots of them, titles like property deed, investment accounts, life insurance policies, custody settlement, and most importantly, last will and testament. They had no idea. My house, paid off in MAINE fully in my name. Not shared, not co-owned, mine. Bought with the money left to me by my father, money I'd never touched until recently. They always joked that I was bad with money. I let them believe that. It kept them from asking questions. What they didn't know was that after their father passed, I took night classes in bookkeeping. I managed his small retirement fund, rolled it into a diverse portfolio, and watched it grow over the years. I wasn't wealthy by Manhattan standards, but for a widow in rural Maine, I was very comfortable, and I had kept records. Every bank transfer, every gift they guilted out of me. The $8,000 for Jeremy's failed landscaping business. The $2,500 to help Hannah's husband get back on his feet after a DUI. The $12,000 they just stole through lies and manipulation. I made copies of every transaction, stamped, dated, sorted. I wasn't just a grieving mother anymore. I was an archivist of betrayal. Then I called someone I hadn't spoken to in years, Carol Baxter. She had been my best friend once. We lost touch after her husband passed, but she was still practicing law in Portland. Carol, I said quietly when she answered, I need to make sure my estate doesn't go to my children. There was a pause. Then she said, I'll be there Friday morning. While I waited, I cleaned the house, not because it needed it, but because it gave me something to do while my mind spun. I found Jeremy's old drawings in the attic. Crumpled birthday card from Hannah that once made me cry. They weren't memories anymore. They were relics of an illusion. When Friday came, Carol sat with me in the kitchen as I laid everything out. Documents, timelines, evidence. You've done more homework than half my clients, she said, flipping through the folders. I was never helpless, I replied, just tired of fighting. We rewrote my will that afternoon. I named a new beneficiary, one they'd never expect. Maria, my housekeeper, the only person who had shown me consistent kindness these past 5 years. She checked in even when I didn't ask, brought me soup when I was sick, fixed the porch railing with her own tools, never asked for a dime more. I once asked her why she was always helping. She smiled and said, because when I'm your age, I hope someone remembers me. I never forgot that. And now, she would inherit everything. My home, my savings, my stocks, my jewelry. Everything my children had taken for granted. I also filed a fraud report with my bank. The envelope of cash had been pulled out days before, withdrawn from a savings account I hadn't touched in years. A red flag by protocol. The fraud officer made a note. I had him send a statement summary. Paper trail secured. I started keeping my phone calls short and sweet with the kids. Polite, distant. I didn't confront them. That would come later. For now, I just let them believe they'd won. I even accepted their fake apologies with a smile. Oh, that money? Don't worry about it, I told Jeremy when he finally got brave enough to mention it. I'll make it up to you, he promised. Of course, I said softly. Let him believe I was still the fool he thought he'd raised. Let him sleep thinking he got away with it. The beauty of justice is that it's quiet when it creeps in, and thunderous when it arrives. I went to the town records office the following week and updated the deed to reflect my new living trust. Carol handled the filings. Everything was legal. Everything was clean. And my children would get nothing, not even a heads up. But the best part? They had no idea I'd been recording. See, a few weeks before they stole from me, Hannah had called on speakerphone while I was cleaning. She forgot Jeremy was in the room. I recorded the whole thing. Their scheme. Their plan to borrow without asking and tell her it was for Jeremy's life or something. Verbatim. Make it sound urgent, Hannah had said. She'll never say no if she thinks someone's dying. They laughed. I cried later that night listening to it again. But I didn't delete it. I saved it. Backed it up. I wasn't done hurting, but I was done being hurt. And soon, the tables would turn. It happened at Jeremy's barbecue, a casual Sunday afternoon in June. Blue skies, the smell of grilled ribs and corn in the air, neighbors mingling on the lawn, plastic cups clinking. The perfect setting for a family to pretend everything was normal. Jeremy had invited half the neighborhood, and me, of course. Just family and friends, he said. Would love for you to be there, Mom. After months of silence and staged politeness, I think he believed I'd finally let go of everything. That I'd chosen peace over resentment. In a way, I had, but not in the way he hoped. I arrived fashionably late, wearing the navy blue pantsuit I'd saved for special occasions. Maria came with me, not as my housekeeper this time, but as my guest, my heir. Jeremy greeted me on the porch with a toothy grin. Glad you came, he said, kissing my cheek. I wouldn't miss it, I replied, smiling just enough to unsettle him. The backyard was bustling with people. Hannah waved from across the yard. Lana was pouring wine. Everything looked picture perfect. Waited until dessert. The moment Jeremy raised his beer to thank everyone for coming and give his little toast to summer, I stepped forward. Mind if I say a few words? I asked, loud enough for the crowd to hush. Jeremy hesitated. Sure, Mom. Go ahead. I stood at the center of the yard, surrounded by people who had known my children since they were in diapers. I looked at their faces, neighbors, old friends, co-workers, the ones who always smiled politely when my kids talked about taking care of Mom. Perfect. All of them were here. Most of you know me as Jeremy and Hannah's mom, I began. Some of you have seen me around town, or dropping off food, or sitting quietly at church. What you may not know is that this past year, my children stole $12,000 from me. There was a pause, a ripple of confusion and awkward coughs. Jeremy let out a nervous laugh. Mom, that's not... They staged a fake emergency, I continued louder now. They told me Jeremy was in critical condition, that he needed emergency surgery. They used fear, my fear as a mother, to take money they had no right to. Lana's glass slipped from her hand and shattered. I believed them, I said, turning to the crowd. Of course I did. I raised them. I loved them. But they lied to me. Together. And they didn't just steal my money, they broke my trust. People were whispering now. Faces turned to Jeremy, who stood frozen, jaw clenched. They thought I was just an old woman who wouldn't fight back, I said. But they were wrong. I reached into my purse and pulled out a neatly folded set of documents. This, I said, holding it up, is a new deed for my house. I had it transferred into a living trust under the name of Maria Gonzalez. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Maria looked stunned, tears brimming in her eyes. Maria has treated me with more kindness and respect than my own blood. She checked on me when I was sick, helped me when no one else did, and never once asked for anything. She is now the sole beneficiary of my estate. Jeremy stepped forward, his voice cracking. You can't be serious. She's a maid. She's a better person than you, I snapped, the only sharpness I allowed in my tone. You, who laughed while stealing from your mother. I turned to the crowd again. And in case anyone thinks I'm exaggerating, I brought proof. I tapped my phone. The speaker crackled to life with a recorded voice. Hannah's. Just say it's a medical emergency. Make it sound urgent. She'll hand it over without blinking. Jeremy's voice followed. I'll cry a little. She eats that stuff up. Easy money. Gasps turned to wide-eyed stares. Hannah stood pale, backing toward the fence. Lana tried to speak, but no words came. Silence fell like a curtain. I spent decades putting everyone else first, I said softly. But this is the last time I'll be treated like a fool. I looked at Jeremy and Hannah, not with anger, but with something worse. Disappointment. You're both off my will, off my property, and out of my heart until you learn what it means to be decent. I turned to Maria and handed her the documents. Congratulations, I said. This house, and everything in it, it's yours. I didn't wait for applause. I didn't wait for tears. I just walked out, heels clicking on the patio stones like punctuation marks. Jeremy called after me. You'll regret this, Mom, but I didn't even turn around, because I wouldn't. Not today. Not ever. That night, I sat on my porch, for the last time. The sun was setting, golden light washing over the garden I'd planted with trembling hands decades ago. Maria brought out tea, still too shy to speak. I looked at her and smiled. I thought giving was my job, I said. But maybe it was about choosing who deserved it. She nodded, her eyes wet, and in that piece I felt something I hadn't in years. Freedom. The next morning they came knocking. First Hannah. She stood on the porch with bloodshot eyes clinging to a lukewarm coffee as if it were some sort of peace offering. Mom, please, she whispered. It was stupid. It was Jeremy's idea. I didn't want to go along with it, but he pressured me. I didn't open the door. I didn't need to. Because for once, I had nothing left to say. And she had nothing left to take. I watched her from the window as she waited. 5 minutes. 10. Then she turned and walked away, her shoulders hunched, her head down like a child sent home from school in disgrace. Jeremy came 2 days later. No grin, no arrogance, just a man unraveling. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. I lost my job, Mom, he said through the door. HR saw the video. Someone posted it on Facebook. You humiliated me in front of the whole neighborhood. I said nothing. He hit the door with his fist, not hard, just enough to let his frustration leak through. You ruined my life. And that? I did answer. No, Jeremy. You did that all on your own. The fallout spread fast. The neighbors, once eager to chat on the sidewalk and wave from their porches, now avoided Jeremy and Hannah like the plague. Invitations stopped. Their kids weren't welcome at birthday parties anymore. People had heard the audio. They knew the truth. Worse than public shame was private reality. Jeremy had bought that oversized SUV on a lease he couldn't maintain. Without his job, the repo truck came within a month. Hannah's in-laws pulled back too, especially when they found out she'd been part of a scheme to scam her own mother. Apparently, stealing from your family didn't pair well with her perfect image as a PTA volunteer and blessed wife. Lana tried texting me once, just a single line. You've torn this family apart. I never replied, because the truth was, I hadn't torn the family apart. I had simply stopped holding it together. I moved back into my house, now under Maria's name but still filled with memories I wasn't ready to let go of. She insisted I stay as long as I wanted, and I promised her the same. Maria adjusted well to her new role, not just as a homeowner, but as the protector of the space we shared. She redecorated the guest room for her daughter, planted herbs in the back garden, and hosted quiet Sunday dinners where no one argued, no one lied, and no one tried to take anything that didn't belong to them. The house felt warm again. Not because of the furniture or the photos, but because of who was allowed in. Every now and then, I'd get a letter from Jeremy or Hannah. They started as angry rants, how I'd betrayed them, how I chose a stranger over family. Then came the pity. We're drowning in bills. Please, just a loan. Can we start over? But my reply, if any, was always the same. You had everything you needed, not just money, but love, and you gambled it for greed. One day I visited the bank and made the final decision. I closed the joint account that Jeremy had once begged me to open, for emergencies. I transferred what remained of my savings into a private account under a new name, and I finally updated my will. Maria's name was the only one on it now, not out of spite, out of clarity. I spent my mornings walking along the coastline in Maine. Sometimes alone, sometimes with Maria. The breeze felt cooler on my skin now, like it carried away everything I had once carried so tightly. The guilt, the doubt, the longing to be accepted by children who only loved me when it was convenient. I didn't regret a thing. If anything, I regretted not doing it sooner. It took losing me for them to realize what I'd been giving all along. And it took betrayal for me to finally recognize I was never the burden. I was the blessing. And I no longer needed their permission to be at peace. 6 months passed. Autumn arrived with golden leaves and quieter mornings. The house was peaceful again. No shouting, no guilt trips, no locked doors or fake emergencies. Just the gentle rhythm of coffee brewing, birds outside the kitchen window, and a calm I hadn't known in years. Then one afternoon I got a letter. It was from Lily, Jeremy's daughter, my granddaughter. She'd always been quiet, more of a bookworm than a talker, but there was a light in her that reminded me of someone I used to be, someone gentle, curious, kind. Her handwriting was still small and neat, just like when she used to scribble notes on sticky pads at my house as a little girl. "Grandma, I don't know exactly what happened, but I'm sorry for not reaching out sooner. I miss you. If there's any way we could talk, or maybe visit, I'd really love to see you." I read it twice, then once more, and for the first time since the barbecue, I felt something warm stir inside me. Not forgiveness, maybe, but something close. I wrote back. We met for hot chocolate at a small cafe downtown. She was taller now, more grown up, but her eyes were still soft. She didn't ask for money. She didn't make excuses for her father. She just listened to everything I had to say. "I just wanted to know your side," she said quietly. "You were always good to me. I didn't want to lose you too." It wasn't a dramatic reunion. No hugs drenched in tears. Just two people rebuilding something quietly, carefully, and that was enough. Later that winter, I made a decision. I met with Maria and told her I wanted to donate part of my remaining savings, not to a faceless charity, but to a local women's shelter. A place where older women, mothers, and widows could go when their own families turned cold. "A fund in your name," I said to Maria, "to help women start over." She cried. I didn't, because I finally understood that tears aren't always the measure of pain or strength. People always think revenge means rage, that it's loud, fiery, dramatic. But mine came with silence, with documents signed quietly, with locks changed in the middle of the night, with the simple refusal to keep explaining myself to people who had already made up their minds. And the truth is, that kind of strength, it scares people more than shouting ever will. I look back now, not with anger, but with clarity. I gave my life to people who saw me as useful, not valuable. And when they showed me their true colors, I finally stopped painting them into a picture they didn't deserve. Respect isn't owed by blood. It's earned through actions, through decency, through care. And if that means my circle is smaller now, so be it. It's quiet here, but it's honest, and at last, I have peace. Now it's your turn. What would you have done if your own children faked an emergency just to steal your money? Do you think I was too harsh for cutting them off? Or was I finally standing up for myself after years of being used? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'm reading everyone. Let's talk about it.